All right, let's dive in. Every single day, thousands of massive ships are crisscrossing our oceans, carrying pretty much everything we rely on. But deep down inside their hulls, they're carrying something else, something invisible and, frankly, pretty dangerous. Today, we're going to uncover a silent invasion that's been happening right under our noses and the incredible global mission to stop it.
So when you think about these giant cargo ships, you picture them full of cars, or electronics, or grain. But what else are they carrying? What's the one thing that nearly every single one of these vessels takes on in one port and just dumps out in another, almost by accident? The answer? It's water. We're talking billions of tons of it. And hiding within that water are living, biological stowaways. These are tiny organisms, bacteria and microbes, that are basically hitching a ride across the entire planet, ready to start an invasion in a new ecosystem where they just do not belong.
So how does this actually happen? Well, the problem starts with something called ballast water. You see, to stay balanced and stable, especially when they're not full of cargo, these huge ships have to pump seawater into giant internal tanks. So they might suck up water in, say, a harbor in Shanghai, sail across the world, and then pump it all out when they load new cargo in Rotterdam. And when that water comes out, so does all the life that was in it.
And believe me, this is no small issue. The official international treaty on this very subject says this transfer causes direct injury or damage. And what does that look like? Well, just imagine a foreign crab species completely wiping out local shellfish, or picture toxic algae blooms shutting down an entire coastal fishing industry. That's the kind of serious damage we're talking about, and it's happening all over the globe.
Now, when you have a global problem, you're going to need a global solution. And that's where this comes in, the International Convention for the Control and Management of Ships' Ballast Water and Sediments. Yeah, it's a mouthful, so everyone just calls it the BWM Convention. Let's break down a couple of key definitions right from the rulebook itself.
Okay, first up, what exactly is ballast water? The convention is super precise here. It's not just any old water on a ship. It is specifically the water taken on board to control the ship's stability and stresses. This is the water that becomes the vehicle, the taxi service for those invisible invaders.
And what about those stowaways? The convention has a name for them: harmful aquatic organisms and pathogens. Now, the key thing to notice here is just how broad that definition is. We're not just talking about some weird foreign fish or a new type of seaweed. This covers anything, even microscopic pathogens that could possibly harm the environment, human health, or our economies by messing with things like fishing or tourism.
So, we've got a global problem, and we've got a global rulebook. But how do ships actually follow the rules? Well, the convention lays out two main standards for managing all that ballast water.
The two big options are called the D1 and D2 standards. Think of D1 as kind of the low-tech, transitional solution. A ship sails far away from the coast, out into the deep ocean, and swaps its coastal water for open ocean water. The idea is that deep-sea critters won't survive near the coast, and coastal critters won't survive in the deep sea. But the real endgame, the final goal, is the much stricter D2 standard. This one requires ships to actually install high-tech onboard treatment systems, things like powerful UV filters or chemical treatments that actively kill or remove organisms before any water gets discharged.
And this slide right here shows you just how incredibly strict that D2 standard is. For any organism that's about the width of a human hair, there have to be fewer than 10 of them in an entire cubic meter of water. A cubic meter is 1,000 liters. To put it simply, we are talking about a level of clean that is basically near sterilization. It's intense.
This whole thing didn't just happen overnight. The convention was actually adopted way back in 2004, but it only became binding international law in 2017. And now, the clock is really ticking. September 8, 2024 is the huge deadline for most existing ships to finally meet that super strict D2 standard. This has been a 20-year journey that is finally coming to a head.
Okay, so we've got the rules, but who is actually making sure that ships are following them? I mean, a rule isn't much good without an enforcer, right? Well, that's where port officials all around the world come into the picture.
The very first line of defense is, you guessed it, paperwork. Every single ship has to carry 3 key documents. There's a management plan, which is basically the crew's instruction manual. Then there's a record book, which is a detailed diary of every single time they take in or discharge ballast water. And finally, an international certificate, which is kind of like a passport, proving the ship's equipment is all up to code and officially approved.
So when a port state control officer actually boards a ship, they follow a really clear 3-step process.
First, they check the certificate. Is it valid? Is it legit? If that's all good, they move on to the record book, making sure the logs match the ship's actual voyage. And if anything looks a little fishy, or even just for a random spot check, they have the power to take a sample of the ballast water right then and there and send it off to a lab for analysis. So we've covered the problem, the rules, and how they're enforced, but let's just zoom out for a second and remember why all this technical stuff matters so much. What are the global stakes here?
When you get right down to it, protecting our oceans from these invisible invaders is really about protecting ourselves. It's about protecting the incredibly delicate balance of marine ecosystems. It's about safeguarding the multi-billion-dollar fishing and tourism industries that absolutely depend on healthy coastlines. And critically, it's about defending human health from nasty waterborne diseases. See, this isn't just some environmental issue. It has huge economic and social consequences for all of us.
Look, the BWM Convention is a monumental global effort. It's a huge step towards shutting down a major pathway for biological invasions. After 2 long decades, its toughest rules are finally taking full effect. But as global trade just keeps growing and growing, it really leaves us with one final question to think about. Is this unprecedented global effort going to be enough to truly safeguard our interconnected oceans for the future?